Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis and our legal expert Carey Shocks as well. It's Friday, so Joe's not with us because I don't know. I guess he goes to the bar.
Motherfucker has a social life out there in Yerevan, so
gross. And to be fair, it is like that time to be going out and doing socializing.
Yeah, Joe has friends and an outside social life.
Yeah,
Dick.
Well, I mean, you still go to shows. I haven't been to a live show. The last live show I went to was pre-COVID. So, but to be fair, I don't really like going to live shows anyway. So,
I mean that's fair. For me, honestly, it was like one of those things during COVID that I hadn't really appreciated. I've been going to shows for like fucking 25 years or something close to it now. I think I went to my first Boston show in 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. It's always been kind of a background, and definitely leading up to COVID, it was kind of a lot of comparatively grumpy things of I'm a little sore today, or it's a little far, then having everything shut down, it was like, oh, this is actually a giant part of my life, and I really miss it.
Right. You can always when you're getting older, you can make the excuses of well, yeah, obviously I'm not going to go drinking on a Tuesday. But I'll still go out on a Friday or a Saturday to a show, but a Tuesday or Wednesday show, maybe not, because I am, in my 30s or so.
Yeah. Definitely don't go as hard. I'm not going to a show on a Wednesday and getting real banged up, particularly now that I have a job that doesn't involve sorting things in a warehouse, but
requires your mental faculties.
Requires me to use my brain.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately I got one of those jobs too. The last show I went to was actually a comedic rapper known as Froggy Fresh. At a little hole-in-the-wall venue that no longer exists. But the time before that, I think, was the Flaming Lips. And it's because my wife made me go. She's like, no, you have to go. You have to see the Flaming Lips at some point. And I think during most of it, I was just annoyed because I was surrounded by people. I don't like being around people, as it turns out. Large crowds of people. And maybe part of that is I'm antisocial, and maybe part of that is because for 2 years of my life, large crowds meant somebody could detonate a fucking explosive. So
yeah. No, I mean that's also fair. I know one of my friends who was at the finish line during the marathon bombing, working for Boston EMS, and then but was also a band manager and a show promoter, and that was definitely a tough thing for him to kind of navigate there for a bit. It's one hand, a lot of crowds, not great. On the other hand, that's kind of also my sideline, and my passion. So the two things together are kind of a little difficult.
Yeah. Well, Carey, today we're gonna tap into your knowledge here. We're gonna tap into that brain. Hopefully, you weren't out skanking until the midnight hours last night. I wanted to talk a lot more about kind of what's going on with Giuliani and Trump and the Proud Boys and all this stuff, because I've been consuming all of this via headlines and tweets. So I don't know, I know Trump is charged in 3 different places, but one is state and the other ones are federal, and there's all kinds of different charges to all of them. And then you've got Giuliani, who the most hoisted by his own petard man ever in history, getting hemmed up over his own RICO Act stuff. So, and I don't really know how a lot of that stuff works. And I figured that probably a lot of other people don't, and have also been consuming these things. I don't want to assume that all of my listeners are as dumb as I am, but part of the reason I got a podcast was so that I could bring people on and ask them questions about random shit for an hour at a time. So, bear with me. Hopefully we're all going to learn something.
Yeah, I think the first episode I recorded with you, way the fuck back in I don't know, whatever, 2019 or whatever, was was titled "What is the Coast Guard?"
Yeah,
to exactly that point, and also RICO in particular is one of those things that's I've joked around with other, because half the people on fucking social media at any given point in time are attorneys. And so I've joked around before that, like it's like libel and slander or like constitutional violations. It's like something that a lot of people feel they know a little bit about. And like, granted, I'm also not going to claim to be any expert. I practice my own, like, kind of, little corner of the law. Like, I won't claim to, but, it's one of those things, like, I at least have like some knowledge about it. And also, like, there's so much of it that just kind of ends up being, kind of entirely like, I don't know, like, just entirely separate, you know what I mean? Like, and and just in terms of people think that, it's like every time that like someone screams about the, First Amendment issue, and it's like, no, this isn't actually a First Amendment issue. Like like this, company totally can just tell you to go fuck yourself and doesn't have to listen to you. Or like this isn't actually libel or slander. Like, like you're just angry on the internet that someone said something mean about you. So,
and aren't we all fucking angry on the internet about something that somebody called us? Yeah, I don't know anything about law. Like beyond, I can, I do know that Twitter can ban you for doing racism online. They used to. They don't really do that anymore unless enough people yell at them about it. But so yeah, my own knowledge of the law is very fleeting because I'm a good boy, Carey. I've never needed a lawyer, except for like one time for a speeding ticket when I was 16 is the only time I ever needed a lawyer. And even that was just my sister was like, give me $600 and I'll make this go away. I don't know how that happened. I mean, she did say, I've got a lawyer, give me $600 and you'll be fine and I'll get your license back. And she did all that stuff. So like that is as far into legality or illegality. I don't know. Hopefully the statute of limitations is passed on that 25-year-old transgression. But yeah, we have Rudy Giuliani, who has been kind of in the forefront of American politics for decades. Like he was the mayor during 9/11. So
yeah, he was America's mayor. He was there with with Hillary and fuck, I can't even remember who the other like New York senator was at that point. But like walking through with his like FDNY ball cap, tore in like the World Trade Center shit. He's famously like, the mayor who started doing all the racism that quote unquote cleaned up New York, up and then, passed it off. And then everyone realized that, his, tough on crime policies were just like, involved mostly just like stopping every single non-white person in the 5 boroughs like 5 times a year to try to hem them up.
Yeah, let's piss off everybody not white in New York City. Certainly there will be no repercussions there.
Yeah, and like, and of course, like, infamously, the, being the mayor of New York City is the highest profile job that never leads to anything else.
It really doesn't. Look at Eric Adams, like, who a man whose like brain is kept in a jar somewhere because it's certainly not inside of him.
Yeah, like, and I mean, like, Eric Adams at least kind of ended up in office. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's like both a buffoon and also profoundly evil. But also like he ended up in office because of because the New York State like Democratic Party, and particularly in the city, is like also just like massively bent in like not in a way of like, public corruption necessarily, though I know that there've been like some allegations about Eric Adams specifically, but bent in the way that like, I mean, what's his name? Who's the last the governor who just Cuomo. Like Cuomo created like a whole separate caucus of like conservative Democratic like legislators and got them to split off of the Democratic Party just to make sure that he could like effectively blame the legislature for not passing like any like even like in progressive and name only legislation. Like it just it's a profoundly shitty place to like do politics in general.
Right, you have to be you have to be a Democrat, but everybody wants to be a Republican, so they just kind of figured out a way to do that. It's like, what if we were Republicans but we're okay with abortion? Done. Good.
Yeah,
let's
I mean,
go with it.
I mean, thankfully, the problem that we absolutely don't have here in Massachusetts, pay no attention to the the man behind the curtain. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, so like. Which is to say, all of it's like kind of a clusterfuck. And so, like, Eric Adams became mayor because he just kind of lucked into it because he like, won a plurality of votes. But like Giuliani, like De Blasio, Bloomberg, like even like Ed Koch and whatever else. Like, I don't, and I can't remember. I was reading something about it, but I think the last person who managed to get elected to like any higher office was maybe in like the 50s and 60s, and it was like I think becoming like a senator or something. But like no one else has like ever been mayor of New York and then gone off to do anything. I mean, and for a long time too, part of it was just because you were basically just a punching bag. Like the mayor didn't really have a lot of power, and it was mostly just about like being someone that everyone could blame when their trash wasn't picked up on time.
I wonder, are there really? I mean, is mayor a good like political track to get somewhere else? I'm trying to think of like, I mean, St. Louis mayors, but I mean, St. Louis mayors are not. Every city has different mayors, but none of mine, that I remember that I've lived under, ever went off to do anything else. They all just retired and got out of politics. I just wonder, like locally, because like you become an alderman or something, and then you run for mayor, but that's like you're just president of the city, and either you need to move on to the state or you need to move on. I guess Cori Bush kind of did. She was, but she's a federal rep.
Yeah.
So I
feel like there's a lot of mayor. Well, so the problem is, of course, like a lot of mayors, they're chief exec, because you're the chief executive of like, the city. And so then they always want to end up either being like governor or president, because those are like the two other like, kind of executive, positions you can be. And so, because they don't want to, because the skills to work, kind of be a mayor and particularly be like a, very prominent mayor, a lot of that it's not about consensus building or whatever, which is theoretically what you're supposed to do, like in kind of more of a legislative body. Because I know, because obviously, like, for us, it was, Marty Walsh, he was appointed to, DOL, and now is like the, leader for the NHL Players Association. I know, like, I could think of like other both governors and mayors who like, and a lot of them end up being like ambassadors, because that's like a good like put out the pasture job.
It's a good not real job.
Yeah, or like I know Charlie Baker, when he just gave up being governor of Massachusetts, he's now like head of the NCAA. Like I feel like you either do that or you like you go you become head of like some college or university or something, or like whatever. But a lot of them like never end up like, they always want to go to higher office, and it like almost like it never ends up working out. I mean, like Chris Christie is like another example of that. Like governor of like New Jersey, like whatever, and then just like career went fucking nowhere. And he's just kind of like, even in the Republican Party, he's just kind of been like embarrassing also ran for like the last like 8 years or so.
Yeah, he's just been a strange blob that's been like Republican just a box of nothing. Just like, there's Chris Christie. Yeah, we don't really do much with him. Is he even he's not a governor anymore, right?
No, he hasn't been he hasn't been since he ran against Trump in 2016 for in the primaries. I think he was out of office shortly after, because like his whole thing was sunk because of Bridgegate.
Yeah. Bridge to nowhere.
The bridge to nowhere is different. That was Alaska. Yeah. This was closing down lanes on Fort Lee because the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, criticized him, and so he closed down lanes on the bridge. And like, I think like an ambulance got stuck and somebody died, or like there was just like a bunch. And like I think a couple of his aides initially got convicted, but it got overturned. But yeah, so all of which, and I suppose kind of like pivoting from there, because for Giuliani in particular, and and kind of even Trump in a way, one of the reasons why they kind of have existed in this ecosystem in New York that is very much a product, even like now, of kind of the milieu of like the 1980s and the 1990s. Kind of being this like. They were, like Trump and Giuliani were, kind of came up and kind of entered the public consciousness at the same time. They both, when Giuliani was kind of most prominent in the early 2000s, that was kind of also when Trump, I guess, was probably like, that was kind of like when he was just very much like, a punchline, kind of an also ran, like really before the apprenticeship, kind of, jump started, his public image. But, they both are kind of, one of the things that they both exist in the New York media ecosystem. And as a result, that's also kind of, I think, one of the things that like, Giuliani, kind of, because once they try to go to the rest of the country, I was like, I don't honestly like, 9/11 was 20 years ago. I don't honestly give a fuck about you anymore. Frankly, being like America's mayor, like that was so long ago.
Right. What have you done recently, man? Like,
yeah, and for Giuliani, all of that has been bad.
Yeah, he's trying to live off of like that one good touchdown throw that he threw in senior year of high school, and it's all just been racism and weird conjecture since then. And so
to that point, so Giuliani's career, and a lot of people don't realize this, started with was really like based around the RICO Act. And so RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. And I'm not going to go deep into it because, I mean, first, I'm not going to pretend that like, I have a special bank of knowledge about it. But, and also because like, I'm sure like, half the people like, having found out, have like looked up the RICO page on Wikipedia for like, the last like, couple weeks.
Well, how is it different than like I'm charging you for doing, crime that we caught you at, but I'm also going to do it as a RICO? Like, I guess like if you are, it helps bring down organized crime. Like, I know that's the idea of it, is to hem people up for organized crime, but I don't understand why he's getting hit with RICO for organized crime. It sounds like he ran around a lot texting people saying, no, you should let Trump win. I don't know how that goes with it to...
Well, so I mean, it helps to explain kind of... So RICO was a law written to address a specific problem. And the problem was kind of maybe not specific to organized crime, but best exemplified by organized crime. So kind of during the 1950s and 60s, this is a time when, kind of organized crime was kind of like, with the exception of maybe of like prohibition, was kind of like at its nadir, and not nadir, kind of like at its peak in the United States. It was kind of the period where, and infamously, like J. Edgar Hoover like didn't claimed organized crime wasn't a thing, and one of the issues that was up until that point, generally had to prove someone had actually committed a crime themselves in order to put them in jail. And, there was conspiracy, but once again, you had to show that people were talking to one another and actively engage in conspiracy in order to, towards a specific criminal goal, conspiracy to murder a specific person or something, in order to, convict them. And the issue, of course, being that, a lot of, figures like, kind of in, like various different criminal organizations realized that meant that, you could insulate your top leaders, right? Like, you could have them, you could have them only talking to one or two people at the very top. And so therefore there was never going to be any proof that they had unless you turned their right-hand man in, there was never like there was no way to convict them. And similarly, even when you could turn individual people and maybe convict them, the sentences that they were facing were comparatively low. This is before the war, this is before Reagan's war on drugs, so like even, and even things like, some, forms of murder, whatever else, that might be, 10 years for a state charge, 15 years for a state charge or something. But, you could generally, kind of, this was an amount of time that people were comfortable, maybe didn't enjoy doing, but were willing to do, as part of like omerta or, some other kind of, criminal, oath.
And you probably get those sentences like, if you're good behavior and, if what was the, God, what was the mob movie I'm fucking blanking on?
What, Goodfellas?
Yeah, if Goodfellas has taught me anything. If you're in the mob and you go to prison, you get to work in the kitchen and it rocks.
Yeah, you get to, shave garlic with a,
a straight razor.
With a straight razor, talking to a guy named Paulie. But yeah, so I mean, like, that was that. And so what RICO was meant to address were these instances. And so you no longer had to individually convict people. They selected a series of what are called predicate offenses, so kind of other crimes that were being done. And if they were done kind of essentially in support of an overall criminal organization, you could then effectively charge it as one big conspiracy, even if you couldn't prove that each individual member was in a conspiracy for each individual crime. So if you have some guys out there loan sharking, if you have some guys out there doing labor racketeering, if you have some guys out there doing public corruption, you could then tie all of them together, because you say, okay, this is all in support of the same crime family. And then, and then, instead of, each of these guys facing maybe 5 to 10 years, suddenly they're all facing 20 to 30, 40 to 50, 60 to life. And so it makes it a much bigger deal. And so, this was something that was, kind of aimed specifically towards organized crime in some ways, but also wasn't, it has a, kind of a myriad of different applications. It can be used, but it's most infamously used against organized crime, and specifically, it came into the public consciousness in the 1980s. So, law was written in the 1970s; it was passed in the 1970s, and it kind of sat, I wouldn't say necessarily dormant for a while, but it was, a lot of U.S. attorneys and prosecutors and everything weren't really familiar with it because it was a brand new statute. And Giuliani rose to prominence in the 1980s because he was working in the Southern District of New York as a prosecutor, which is, Southern District is, the federal prosecutor's office, U.S. Attorney's office. And they made what's called the commission trial against organized crime in New York. And so they, through a variety of circumstances, primarily having to do with various forms of kind of, public bid corruption involving cement companies, like some labor racketeering and a few other things. They were able to tie together the heads of a bunch of the major crime families in New York and send everyone off to prison for 100 years a pop. And so that was really kind of what made Giuliani's name. He was, the tough on crime guy who, faced down the mafia in New York City. And as a result, that was, he was cleaning up the city kind of, one concrete truck at a time. And so that was kind of that was the genesis of his. And so then he kind of then went on to, eventually enter politics. He famously conducted what is now acknowledged to be a, fairly racist campaign against former Mayor Dinkins.
There was a lot. Yeah. His stuff in the 90s, it was very surprising. Just, I was not really politically aware until the last, decade or so of my life. But when all the stuff kind of started coming out about Giuliani and you see what he was up to during all that in the 90s, you're like, holy shit, this man was incredibly racist. I know the 90s wasn't great, but you would think that the abject racism that was going on would not have been, it wouldn't have flown. But apparently it did because it worked.
Yeah, I mean, so I think he first ran in 89, but it was the 93 election where he ran for mayor again, and this is the one where there had been a couple riots of one sort or another, the Crown Heights riot, in New York City. He was infamously he was a speaker at a police benevolent association rally opposing Dinkins, who was a African American mayor of New York City. And it evolved into a riot with, a couple thousand cops just kind of storming City Hall and blocking traffic. They never, he, hired cops to monitor polling places. He won by a fairly low margin and, was the first Republican mayor of New York City in, a generation. But that was kind of really set the tone for, kind of then who he would be later on, and then I won't, we don't need to go through kind of his entire history as mayor. But, he quote unquote cleaned up, crime in New York City, which is often, kind of racist policing methods. He's, he was the mayor during 9/11. And then he tried to kind of use that as a springboard to kind of, national popularity, and it never really worked. After, his kind of attempts at running for, testing the waters, running for president, I think he ran and lost against, he run against Hillary. I think at one point for senator.
That sounds familiar.
Or no, he might. No, I think he maybe just thought about doing it, and then he tried to run for president the first time in 2008, and was the big kind of popular favorite, kind of like Jeb was in 2016. And then, his entire campaign just kind of fell on its face.
Was Jeb the favorite, or did we just making fun of Jeb?
I think he was kind of he was thought as kind of the establishment favorite. Oh, well, we've managed, put two Bushes in office. We might as well put a third. And, kind of similar to Bill was a very popular president, so maybe Hillary will be too. This was around the time, and I know we talked about it in previous episodes, and I think on a couple occasions I got the the name of the guy wrong. But it was around when Bernard Carey, who used to be the chief of police, and who had been recommended for secretary. This is when he got convicted of all the fraud that he was doing related to being an Iraq contractor, because he'd been doing like security contracting, I think, for like the Green Zone during the Iraq War.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so, he kind of, I mean, all these guys, and that's the thing is like, one of the things I think that's interesting about this is none of these guys ever go away anymore. Or at least up until now, none of them go away. Like they just kind of, you do your time, it's like Ollie North, you do your time in prison, and it used to be you had to spend a long time, like in the, kind of in the, doing the, I'm sorry, to be Bush, like, painting pictures of veterans who got like fucked up in the wars that you started. And now the refractory period is so much different, and none of these guys actually ever go away. You just, you like, you just loudly proclaim your innocence regardless of all the facts around you, and then do a Fox News, like become a commentator and go on every Sunday and like make grandpa mad.
I actually had to escort Ollie North in Afghanistan one time.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Why was he in Afghanistan?
It was 2004. Fox. He was a Fox News commentator then. He was like one of their. So they're just like, let's send the veteran to Afghanistan to like meet the troops and report on stuff. And I had no idea who the fuck he was, like, because I was 20 and I didn't care. But yeah, I had to follow him around everywhere.
I feel like also like Iran-Contra has kind of got a memory hold in a weird way. Like everyone thinks back to like Nixon, and no one ever thinks back to like, if it wasn't for Ollie North, like, Bush 41 probably would never have been president because he too might have been indicted.
I think it gets memory hold because he just doesn't. Ollie North doesn't do anything anymore. He's just a Fox News commentator sometimes. So it's pretty easy to just be like, yeah, I'm Ollie North. I was a veteran. Please don't look at my Wikipedia.
Yeah. Please don't look any further into that whatsoever. So I don't know. So at that point, Giuliani disappeared. He spent some time as kind of like effectively like a rainmaker. When any of these guys join a law firm, they're not writing briefs. They're not arguing before the Supreme Court. They're just there to like, if they have friends and neighbors or whatever else, they'll come to his law firm first, and he can refer the business to the firm. Like no one actually like, he's not doing any actual legal work. And I think that's kind of important. Like when you think about what's going on now. Because, of course, infamously, he became, like Trump's top stooge when Trump was in office. He was always kind of like, looking vaguely sweaty and having shoe polish run down his head. There was his inglorious, and then, of course, all of his inglorious actions during the 2020 election where, he allegedly, helped Trump do the crimes that he's now been indicted for. And so the thing about it that's, I don't know, really interesting to me is that they just... because he's not really a lawyer anymore.
I was wondering about like, that. Like he doesn't do law. Like he was Trump's top lawyer for a while, but he doesn't do law stuff. Like he's just a crony.
And realistically, he has not done law stuff since
Is he
charitably.
Still barred? Like
I think he got tossed. I don't think he's actually barred anymore. I don't remember if his license is suspended. I don't think his license is valid anymore. If it is too, like, he might only be but he hasn't actually practiced law as, you would think of it really since like charitably the late 80s. Like he has really not been like a practicing trial attorney since, I've been alive. And so that kind of really, for me, is the really kind of, and so now, of course, he's allegedly been indicted as part of, this conspiracy to, overturn the 2020 election, in Georgia, along with all the other kind of, myriad criminal cases that, Trump and, like a few of the rest of the, his kind of hangers on are, have been indicted for and, charged with and answered to and whatever. And so it's now come full circle, and the man whose face was kind of known as really bringing RICO to the forefront is now himself, subject to RICO charges.
We love a man. We love a man who shoots himself in his foot 30 years later. It's really fun to watch. A couple of other. So what's the What's the over-under on this guy ever going to jail?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, one of the things is, of course, there's, so many kind of overlapping, there's, I think New York State, like they've been, they've handed down some indictments over like, Trump's hush money payments made in 2016. The one in the case in Florida is about, the fact that he was just like propping up, Trump was propping up his feed on documents, like secret documents he took out of the White House. It was just like had lying around Mar-a-Lago for, months. But the only one that's really specific to the kind of the 2020 election, the other ones like, I mean, who really knows? And those really don't involve Giuliani. This one is the one that has Giuliani's, mugshot. And you also just have to love all these guys like still wearing their stupid, like he's still wearing his little fucking American flag like pin in his lapel, like it's like fucking 2005 still. Even as like he's true patriot to the end. The Patriots are control. But I don't know. I mean, it's like there is some question for some of these things. Some of the in particular the count of conspiracy against rights that Trump and co have kind of been charged with here is kind of a novel legal theory. There's not a lot of, to be frank, there's not a lot of law kind of about both charging presidents and ex-presidents, because it doesn't happen that often in this country. There's not a law of kind of about like various different kind of 14th Amendment things in certain ways, and this is one where it's allegedly an attempt to quote oppress, threaten, or intimidate people and their rights to vote in an election. And it was written post Civil War as part of the 14th Amendment. It was really meant about kind of a Reconstruction era law, meant to prevent former Confederates from intimidating newly freed slaves from exercising their franchise. But kind of its use in this way is a novel legal theory, but it's I've certainly having read people arguing both sides of it, I think that people arguing and say this is contemplated by the terms of the amendment is probably right. And also there's one of the complicating factors too is that I think it was a few months ago, Giuliani and some of his pleadings has said that he's not contesting that he said some of the said things about some of the poll workers in Georgia that he was on, because of course he can't, right? Like these are all things that were recorded in the media, they were widely reported, like you can't really he's more contesting that they are
threatening or
right,
you're taking me
of,
out of context when I said we should murder that person so that Trump would win.
Yeah, or like outside the bounds of the outside the bounds of his First Amendment rights, right? Like I'm allowed to say that all these people were stuffing ballot boxes even if they weren't, because I had a good faith concern or something.
Because I live in America and I have free speech, sir.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of remains to be seen, but this is like because he's part of this kind of overarching conspiracy. And it is also a state trial. I think I saw Jim Jordan has already tried to exercise congressional oversight over the Georgia prosecutor's decision to charge them in this matter. And, she's written back saying, fuck you. This is like, a matter of federalism. Like we can charge whatever the fuck we want. Like, you have no oversight here. So it is kind of, it is, it's hard to say, but it's also one of those things where because of this law that Rudy himself really championed, there is a chance that there might be like a plea bargain here. And I think it also, part of it depends, right, on like, what happens, because a lot of this is going to continue to go on. I think the last I saw, the court date was scheduled for March of next year, which of course is going to be right in the middle of, the presidential primary season. There's some question, I mean, are some of these guys, might they, if this drags on into next summer, might you see guilty pleas with the idea that, they think that like if Trump gets back into office, maybe they get another round of pardons. There's some question as to whether or not this is, even the indictment itself is going to be enough to keep Trump off the ballot in some states. I think that's a little bit more tenuous.
Mm-hmm.
So
I saw them talking about keeping him off the ballot in Georgia, and how I think that the governor can or can't do. I don't know. There's, as you said, there's no precedent. This has never happened before, so it's a lot of no, I don't have to do that if I don't want to, or I'm going to. It really depends on, do you like Trump or not, and and that's gonna inform where you come from.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things too, of course, is like there is really no precedent in the United States for a lot of this because we never got to see Richard Nixon on trial. We never got to see Ronald Reagan or the first George Herbert Walker Bush on trial. Unfortunately, we also didn't get to see George Herbert Walker Bush eaten. For more on that, there's
check
go
the Lions led by
back
donkeys.
catalog of the Lions led by donkeys back catalog there. So there is a lot, but I think it's interesting in the way that you get a lot of apocalyptic language about it. But if you look at a lot of other, kind of even like if you want to think of them as like pure democracies or pure systems, for lack of a better term, whether it be kind of in like France or Italy or Germany or other places, there is kind of like a little bit more of like a recognition of like holding the chief executive accountable for certain things, or at least kind of an idea that like conspiracies can happen at like a higher echelon of power, and that's something that we've never really despite everyone trying to bring up the bankers plot supposedly foiled in the 1930s against FDR, it's something that's never we've never really confronted head on in the United States. And so it'll be kind of I do think that it's possible you might have some people pleading. It's possible also too, like as I said, like Giuliani is really not a lawyer anymore. He seems to have been handling most of this himself. A lot of these guys are having trouble getting counsel because, I think Giuliani's said that he's almost bankrupt as part of all of this.
Yeah. Trump recently had a $100,000 a plate charity dinner to help him out with his legal fees. But somebody was just like, that's not going to cut. Like, he's going to need millions of dollars to deal with this.
Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who, for one reason or other, have had to hire an attorney at a lot of times. And like, it's not cheap. A lot of it is, even a, fairly standard, fighting a fairly standard dismissal or something can be, or like a fairly standard, like wrongful termination or something can be like, I don't know, like a, easily a 5-figure proposition. Particularly if you're having to go through trial, probably close to 6 figures if you go all the way through the trial and like, it gets decided like, by a jury. A lot of folks, for smaller cases, if someone's indigent, you might be able to get someone to work on contingency. Normally that's about a third of what, you're expected to recover. But like in these situations where it's criminal offense, you're probably going to have to put up, unless there's someone who's willing to do it, pro bono because they, particularly believe in the innocence or they believe in the cause or something, you're going to have to put up a retainer. You're going to have to like, put up good faith money that, the firm is going to charge against. None of the people who have any experience in doing this are going to come cheap. And, and like a lot of the legal talent kind of along these far right guys, I know for, when, Charlottesville happened and like they were trying a lot of the Nazis there, like everyone was making fun of all the lawyers who showed up in court because there was like the guy who showed up in like, fucking breeches and a tricorner hat, like not, being an attorney is like getting licensed is really not that hard. A lot of people, particularly if you take the bar once or twice, like if you study hard enough, you can get it done in a lot of ways. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are the brightest fucking guy in the room. And at this point, because they've been so bad at paying their bills, a lot of these, right-wing figures, even the traditional kind of like, conservative law firms and other things, they're not going to touch them because they just don't want to kind of be, for all of their, blog posts they might write supporting them, they don't actually want to, they don't want to actually deal with these guys at trial because, it's not a great case.
Yeah, it's not a great, like, yeah, you did it. I support you, but you did it. And also you're not going to pay me for what you did. So where exactly is the point for me to do this? So it is very fun to watch all these guys get really hung out to dry because it's not just like Trump is doing this for Giuliani, but there's still like another dozen people who are part of this. I think it was 19 altogether who are part of this RICO charge. So there's a lot of people who are gonna kind of get fucked over. I mean, like I say fucked over. And I don't want you to think that like they don't deserve it, but as proper leftists, we believe everybody should have a right to good counsel, even if you did it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it is kind of funny watching, of course, because as ever with a lot of these folks, they believe in independence and that the system works, and and like cops always get their man and whatever, up until the point that they're on the wrong side of the law. And so you've seen like I think I saw the attorney for one of these folks like posting something on the internet talking about how they what do you call it, they every time I call like my client, I have to I have to pay a $4 fee, and it's 35 cents a minute, and and like so a simple call can be like $20, and the connection sucks, and like blah blah blah, or all similarly all these guys like there was and even and this is extended to a lot of the January 6th folks, right? Like oh well, they're not respecting the vegan diet that I tend to, or like I can't chow down on like raw bull testicles like while I'm in like DC lockup. Like all these guys, suddenly there's kind of, which it would, I mean, the funniest, the funniest positive of all of this would be like, some criminal justice reform under the guise of, because all these folks are suddenly realizing that the consequences of your actions in this country actually really fucking suck.
Yeah, it turns
like
out,
once you're on the wrong end of sovereign power.
Yeah, it turns out jail fucking sucks, guys. It really sucks, and that's kind of the point. Now I don't agree with that, but this is what you guys were really into about 10 years ago. So not gonna feel a whole lot for you.
Yeah, you've all been like glad, grandstanding about how like everyone needs to like, live in shitholes that are like dirty and, disgusting and eat bad food and whatever. And it's like, well, now that's kind of where you are on the thing. And, all of them have like shown themselves to be, congenitally unable to stop posting through it. So of course that's, part of the other problem too, right? Like, I think there's a lot of X factors here, and I think in a lot of ways, like ultimately, folks like Giuliani and the rest are going to end up being kind of their own worst enemies more than anything else.
Yeah, they're gonna continue to open their mouths when they should really shut their mouths. And we are recording this on Shut the Fuck Up Friday.
Yeah. I mean, and and of course also too, like they. They all have overlapping interests, so kind of similar to like the mafia. When I mean that's and going back to that part, I mean, one of the reasons why, it kind of was thought that RICO kind of broke the back of a lot of organized crime was because once these guys started facing not 5 and 10 years, but 100 years, that's when you had, underbosses, capos, whatever, starting to, turn state's evidence and like, like Sammy the Bull, was it Gravano? Gravano. Who was known for like, turning state's evidence because like, when it was time to like actually, phase down how much time he was going to do overall, it wasn't worth it anymore. Like, your vow of silence isn't worth it. And so if it seems likely that some of these folks, are going to get time, maybe not in like a, even in like a club fed white collar prison, but like might actually do more serious time in a more serious federal prison, maybe some of them flip. I mean, that's part of also the cost of it too, right? They all have to retain separate attorneys. They all have different interests. And those, they might find over time, however much they make public statements at the moment, that, maybe Trump is no longer acting in their public interest. And maybe they, think that there's, if they, shuffle a little bit to the, one side or another, maybe they can, end up on Fox News instead of federal prison or something if they like throw him under the bus and say that, I don't know, he was secretly all doing it for Hillary or something.
And that's kind of when you said RICO charges going from 5 to 10 to 60, 70. That does a like, oh hey, wait a minute, I can what do you guys want to know? Because like I don't personally as a person who reads the news and has some of my mental faculties, it's very stupid to get in league with Donald Trump because he will throw you under the bus immediately. I feel like Giuliani probably only gets away with what he does because he knows too much, would be my guess. But yeah, for the most part though, it's not a great position to be in when Trump notices you.
Well, I mean, it's the old, it's the Arrested Development, like meme, right? Like, everyone getting in league with Trump. Maybe this, it never works out for anyone else, but maybe it'll work for me. And which I mean, of course, has been funny. I think I saw, earlier today that like I think Lindsey Graham is now getting indicted too. I mean, like a lot of these guys, you kind of seen them kind of, show that there is kind of no like whether it's Romney or whether it's Ted Cruz, like all of these kind of supposed like, figureheads of the modern conservative movement who are supposed to be the ones who like, quote unquote, we're going to stand up to Trump, have all shown themselves that like, if they think that, they can gain a 5% advantage by instead throwing in with him, that, they'll do it, and they have. And so it's been kind of, and so, while, philosophically, defund and, abolition, while criminal justice reform broadly is like something that, is like, a wonderful and like, heavily supported like leftist position, it is still really fun to watch all these guys just like absolutely like fuck themselves on this one. Because like, like as with military justice and like whatever, like you have to fuck up so bad in the system to be one of these guys and actually get held accountable. And so like even the possibility that might be a thing is like is kind of a
it feels good. Look, we are imperfect people, all right? And
yeah,
well, for the people who are around me and the people who I see every day, I want everything for them. And because I cannot put Giuliani into a trebuchet and launch him into the ocean myself, I will instead suffice with laughing at him while he goes to prison, even though I know jail's bad. What if we had jail just for Giuliani and it really sucked? Is that okay with everyone?
Well, I mean, I remain very heavily in the camp of we should actually just make Escape from New York real. And just wall off most of New York City and just, it would, this is part of my greater platform for Massachusetts is just,
turning New York City into a penal colony.
Yeah. I'm just, I'm
New York City is the new transportation.
This is finally, this is, or, maybe just like Long Island as a whole. Like, I don't, with respect to all of, the Strong Island hardcore fans out there, would we really miss it? Write in, not to me. I don't know, write into Tom.
Well, Tom know what you think about these things.
Tell Irish Tom what you think about it, and he'll get back to you as soon as he can.
I'll be very confused by everything.
Yeah. And so, and I suppose finally for some of this, it's also been fun kind of getting the Schadenfreude of like, watching like all the Proud Boys and their associates like also eat shit on this entire one. And particularly, I want to like, Stuart Rhodes, who was, he was the Oath Keepers guy with the eye patch, which like, I think I, along with everyone else, thought was combat related, but it's actually because he's just a giant fucking dumbass and shot his own eye out.
Well, he dropped a gun. So
yeah, but still, like,
yeah.
I feel like there's an assumption, that like, oh, that must be, it's you fucked up. All right, cool. But also Enrique Tarrio, the Proud Boys, the Cuban Proud Boys guy from Miami, just managed to land himself 22 years, which, shout out to that guy for, deciding that he wasn't going to.
And I saw something that said that like his plea offer was 9 to 11 years if he had just pled down. And I saw people like, there were arguments like, well, obviously that much of a difference between the plea, you're punishing him. And like, yes, motherfucker, that's the whole point of this is we're punishing them for doing sedition against America.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's like one of the like, infamously, the guy who was at one point supposedly the leader of the Proud Boys, and then was revealed to have been a long-standing FBI informant for very, because he had like, gotten caught like running scams involving like diabetes test strips and like a bunch of other shit down in Florida over the course of his like earlier life, causing a bunch of the chapters to then split away and the organization to like kind of splinter. Has now managed to can you imagine like having to go to jail and then explaining that you were there because I think the fucking not to do internet review, but I know the Hell Dude said this because you got way too into your politics gang, like telling a bunch of like bloods who are doing like 30 years for like cocaine trafficking that you're there because like you were president of organization based on a Disney song. It's just going to be like, I don't know, man. That's like some real fucking weird shit.
And to go in and just be like, yeah, my gang name is the Proud Boys. It's taken from a Disney movie song from Aladdin, but you probably don't know it because it was in a song that was cut for time. So if the prison ever shows the extended cut of Disney's 1993 Aladdin, you guys will know what I'm talking about, why we call ourselves Proud Boys, because there's a song about being proud about your boy. No, it has nothing to do with like toppling over America or anything like that. We just really like it. Anyway, what's this Crip Walk thing that you're doing? Oh, you're stabbing me. Okay.
Yeah, like don't worry, like like filing filing a lot of letters with the warden of your prison, not for like various different like actual like kind of terms and conditions of your imprisonment, but because you really want them to show like the Criterion episode edition of Aladdin with that song in it. I mean, and of course, like the thing, of course, that sucks about all of this is they provided enough of an opening that now we have kind of actual neo-Nazi groups kind of popping up in larger numbers in places that hadn't seen that happen really since once again probably the 70s or the 80s. I'm not going to mention any of them because fuck all those groups and fuck every Nazi. But I mean, it is I suppose maybe not hopeful, but it is like at least a good thing to see that in some cases, like this kind of originator group that provided the gateway for a lot of these groups to kind of gain access to more mainstream and maybe start to recruit members is kind of had so many of its participants kind of end up in jail over one fucking dumb charge or another.
Right.
The other one thing of is what is it, Joe Biggs? I think that's what I remember him primarily. It's because I think he was like a Proud Boy or something like out of like the Pacific Northwest, and I remember that he showed up at the rally that the rally against socialism or whatever that they were going to try to have in Boston Common immediately after Charlottesville, when like they 10,000 people showed up otherwise, and then like 6 of these dudes did, including him, and there was like a really pathetic picture of him like in a gazebo on Boston Common, just like taking a selfie, like, oh, the police aren't letting us out. And it's like, yeah, that's right, motherfucker. Fuck them right off.
There's apparently that guy recently called into Alex Jones' show. Also a man who I don't understand how he has a show. Shouldn't he be like having no money? But yeah. He called Alex Jones from prison and was bragging that President Trump will let him out. So I feel like the real like the ending jab in the ribcage for a lot of these guys and a lot of these neo-Nazi groups is for Trump to like lose. Like, and I wish that we could do it as a no, he loses because he sucks and Joe Biden is better, because that's not how anything actually works around here. But like, to lose is to be like, look, nobody's coming for you. You guys are fucked. Now the rest of you who are not currently fucked, the rest of you Nazis, take your Nazi shit off and go home. Just because you see what's going to happen. Like, your guy isn't going to get into power, and even if he does, he's not going to be able. Like, I doubt that Trump would pardon these guys. He didn't pardon the Tiger King. Why is he going to pardon you, man?
Yeah, well, and like he did, like kind of pardon, like here and there, or whatever else. But it's like you're essentially hoping that like he makes it to office, he remembers your name when he makes it to office, and like he has the attention span to actually sign the pardon forms. Which is like certainly one choice. But I mean, if you're going down for 22 years, like that, that might be one that you might not necessarily want to risk. I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's banking, and I know that a lot of the people who are convicted have like expressed remorse, and like, fine, you're still going to prison, but maybe you'll come out of it not an insane shithead. But like going into prison and continuing to be an insane shithead, like I'm very much looking forward to the crash at the end of this.
Well, and I think really more than anything else, and and when I said like earlier, none of these guys go away. That's really all I want. I am so fucking sick of like, every time like, Newt Gingrich pops back up for some fucking reason, or we have to look at like the leering skeleton that masquerades as Bill Clinton, or like I have to give a shit about like what Bill Gates is doing, or like fucking Scott Walker pops up again. Like I would just like some of these. I would like some of the guys to go away. Yeah. I'm tired of the same guys.
Let's get some new guys. Let's get some normal new guys.
Like it would be just great if like, maybe not even major consequences, but I liked it when at least they had to go away for a while. And now it just kind of feels like, no matter who it is, no matter whether it's like fucking Rudy Giuliani or, you know, OJ Simpson or like whoever the fuck, they will not go the fuck away. Like, I mean, and I know, I think I said this like, I don't know, like in something like maybe a couple weeks ago, like, you know, I think, you know, when we come as the, you know, when the Zoo Crew Triumvirate comes to power, one of the things that I'm going to propose to the group is going to be, you know, if you run for major office, if you want to be president or whatever else, that's fine. As soon as you leave office, you're transported to, I don't know, the prison colony of Staten Island, and you have to wear a hair shirt for the next 20 years.
Yep.
Like, you know, none of the speaking tour shit. You don't get to be Barack Obama posting your Spotify playlist. You don't get to, like, you know, give commencement speeches or motivational speeches for like $50,000 a pop or an honorary degree. No, you have to, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. The responsibility means that you have to like flagellate yourself for the next couple decades until we decide to let you out again. I don't know that it will necessarily reduce the number of sociopaths, but at least a little bit, like, you know, maybe get some ones who are like a little bit more like, you know, recognize that there might be a trade-off to public service.
You know, Escape from New York is actually shot in St. Louis, so we could also use St. Louis and just wall that off too. If we want to go full Escape from New York, like we want to have that fight on the bridge, we have that bridge, so we can do that. We can make that happen.
You know, it's, you know, once again, thank you to St. Louis for being willing to take one for the team. You know, it's, you know, before it was the gateway to the West, and now maybe it's the gateway to a new and renewed America.
It's a gateway to the rest of Massachusetts. Carey, thanks for coming on. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Zoom, zoom, zoom.